Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about providing cleaning services to autistic and developmentally disabled clients, okay? So I'm going to try and go over some best practices for resourceful and supportive and effective service, right? So there's definitely a stigma versus reality thing going on here. Some of you may not know that I was a behavioral specialist for Pride Industries for maybe 5 years before I went off to college. And it gave me an opportunity to really kind of get a glimpse inside, that whole scene. It's a different world, being in that environment. And, you learn a lot, okay? So I wanted to take an opportunity just to kind of go through some of those things so that, when we enter a household that has either autistic or developmentally disabled people in it, we know the best practices as far as getting, navigating the whole situation, right? So every person's abilities, sensitivities, and preferences are unique, okay? Again, this is one of those things that we just, you can't assume, right? Some may be sensitive to noise, smells, changes in their environment, right? And so these are things that we're going to be affecting, okay? So there very well may be, some uncomfortable vibe to the place at first, right? But, it's important to recognize the signs of that discomfort, okay? Such as they may be covering their ears, avoiding eye contact, maybe they're pacing, back and forth, right? So you need to kind of try and pick up on those signs as you go. Don't just kind of walk around and work and not acknowledge them and work around them, right? It's important to recognize them as human beings, okay? So like most things, avoid assumptions, okay? Ask caregivers or the client about their preferences when you're going through. Usually you're gonna do a walkthrough, with the customer. So, try and clear anything like that up, right? It's important not to call them a slur inadvertently, right? When a lot of us were growing up, it was common to use some words and phrases that, are just no longer appropriate, okay? You can't use slow or simple or retarded. None of those things are appropriate anymore, right? It's like if somebody was calling somebody a name about it before, my gosh, we do not want to use that, okay? Why is it harmful, right? Like when you don't ask somebody, so it's really important to use the person first language, right? So unless an individual requests to be identified first language, right? So we want to say things like person with developmentally disabled instead of developmentally disabled people, okay? Big difference there, right? People first, okay? Or a person with autism or, an autistic person. There's a difference if you're on that side of it, hearing it, okay? So why is it harmful, not to do these things, right? It devalues the individual's humanity, okay? Think about it, right? It really does, okay? It creates feelings of shame, okay? Isolation or fear even. It can discourage people from seeking help. It can discourage people from, participating in community life, right? Why is it harmful? So, when I was working with developmentally disabled adults, okay, there was this one Halloween, and, Dale, he worked so hard for like a month before, right? Making his costume and getting it all ready and practicing his face paint and just, the whole thing. I got to see him in the care home, and it was just incredible. He was so proud. And, and I took him out trick-or-treating, right? It was part of the fun things you get to do when you're out there. And, and we got to this one house, and the guy answers the door and, just becomes a really, big jerk and, gives him a lecture on how he's too old to be trick-or-treating and, he should be ashamed of himself, and just really dug into him like a bully, and so Dale, he turned around and walked away, and he was just crying. I mean, this guy is a 45-year-old man with Down syndrome, right? And he is absolutely inconsolable. I mean, you know, how do you deal with that? I mean, like, if the guy was just a little bit sensitive, right? If he had any sensitivity at all, he wouldn't have done that, right? I mean, that poor guy. He thought, he was crying the whole way home, thinking that all that work he did for his costume wasn't enough. And the guy just didn't like his costume. He couldn't process what was happening, which sometimes I think maybe was a good thing. But I mean, the poor guy, it was heartbreaking. If you were there, you would see, you know, these are things people used to call PC, you know. Why do they have to make everything political? You know, people used to call my clients retards, okay, and that was okay back then. You know, so give me a little slack on this one. You know, it's you know, what they call them, you know, anything tard, libtard, retard, any of that, just not at our company, okay? Check our harassment policy, and you know, if somebody does that when you get in their house, just turn around and leave. All right, I'll talk to them. All right. So, you know, what do we call political correctness these days? Jesus. I guess they call it woke. So it's really not about politics, you guys. It's about humanitarianism. I just want to make this crystal clear. At Katie's, we recognize and appreciate how hard it is to live in someone else's shoes, right? And we try to be mindful of that, right? So, you know, if woke is an awareness of social issues and empathy and commitment to fairness and common decency, then yeah, we're woke. That's what we identify as, okay? We're a woke business, because those are our company values to a T. I can pause, let you think about that, right? Especially when it comes to people with developmentally disabled, you know, disabilities. It's not about politics. It's about people and empathy and humanitarianism. And those things have no place in politics, and I don't know why they're wrapped up. Why I have to say we're a woke company is ridiculous, okay? I'm telling you, listen to that angel on your shoulder, because it's guiding you to wonderful places, okay? You know, mark my word, love wins, you guys, okay? So just follow that. I don't care about politics. It doesn't matter, right? But just don't insult developmentally disabled people, not just around me, period, right? These are people, okay? Anyways, I only really respect one type of customer, and it's the one that treats the janitor the same as the CEO, okay? So I'll just put it that way. That guy who bullied Dale, man, he changed me forever, and I will absolutely back you up if somebody ever uses tard anything, right? Leave. I'll talk to them, okay? They won't be a customer anymore. So anyways, communication strategies, right? So best practices, be clear, use simple language, you know, without idioms, right? Or sarcasm, right? You don't want to say things like it's raining cats and dogs, you know? Then just look outside, what? It's not raining cats and dogs. So anyway, speak slowly, give some extra time for responses, okay? You know, check for visual cues or demonstrations that might be more effective than verbal explanations, okay? If speaking directly is difficult for them, allow them to communicate through a caregiver or a device, right? Maybe they want to text you instead. That's perfectly fine, right? So here's some, you know, environmental considerations when you're in that environment. Just try and avoid sudden loud noises. Turn off your vacuum or loud equipment when it's not in use. You know, strong chemical odors can be overwhelming, right? So we want to try and minimize unnecessary changes to the layout of their space, unless agreed upon. They say, oh, can you move this chair? You know, let them know before moving personal items, right? You know, so behaviors and boundaries. So some individuals may prefer no physical contact at all, right? Respect people's personal space. If they say there's an autistic child or an autistic person, just don't put your hands on them, okay? If the client becomes agitated, just stay calm. It's nothing personal, right? Step back, give space, all right? There's things like that can be really aggravating, right? So when I was working as a behavioral specialist, there's this guy named Ernie, right? And he had some compulsions, right? And he got up to go over to a workstation, and he was coming back, and there was like Dale, again, this other client I was working with, was at the table, right, sitting, working, all right? And Dale needed a little bit of help, so I went over and I went to go sit down to help him out. And by the time I noticed Ernie went over there, he flew over, he pulled the chair out. I just fell right back. I bumped my head on the back of the chair. Yeah, it was frustrating, like I'm like, what the, but you can't, right? You can't. It had nothing to do. He wasn't trying to hurt me. It was his chair. It was Ernie's chair. Couldn't sit there, right? So it wasn't something he had control over, right? So never take that sort of frustration personally, right? It may be a response to overstimulation, okay? Always maintain a respectful, non-judgmental demeanor. We don't want them to think like you're like, I'm better than you, because that's not true. Nobody's better than anybody. Working with caregiver, and support staff is important. You want to collaborate with the caregivers to create a cleaning plan that meets the client's needs, right? So if you're in a care home and there's 5 bedrooms and they all need to be cleaned, try and, kind of work out the route. Where should I start? What should I do, right? So these ones aren't so much work from the top down, back forward. Sometimes you need to, do different rooms first, and that's for really good reasons. So definitely ask about the best times for cleaning to avoid disrupting routines, right? Maybe sometimes they have to watch a particular TV show at a certain time, right? It's important to them, right? So, ask the client before entering their room, a nice little, if the door's closed, knock, knock, if it's cracked open, I'll usually say knock, knock, and they'll get a little chuckle. So, anyway, some pro tips would be to, share any, safety concerns with the caregivers promptly. If somebody looks like they're extra agitated or whatever when you see them, just make sure and mention that. They work with them every day, okay? Just follow any specific instructions provided for interacting with that client, right? So when you talk to the caregiver and they say, Ernie's gonna have his headphones in, and just go ahead and, let him do his thing. He'll try and stay out of your way. And just listen to that advice, okay?